This is another UCL Fantasy video ahead of Matchday 6, the best Limitless team you can make. The team selection video was uploaded earlier today if you want to check that out. And there's going to be another upload after this. So that's a triple upload today for UCL Fantasy. And of course we have the deadline stream tomorrow. So let's get straight into it. Now before we begin, I just want to say a massive thank you as always to the channel members, to everyone who subscribed to the channel, and if you haven't already, smash the like button and subscribe if you're new around here. And I also want to kind of make a big point about rotation. We just don't know exactly who is going to be benched, because even with some of the teams who have already qualified and in first position, they may still play, like Mohamed Salah, because there aren't too many alternatives in their position. So it's very difficult to predict who is actually going to be dropped, who is going to play. We can only give our opinions, but nothing will be concrete. And for example, you look at someone like João Cancelo. City have already qualified, but City have options at both left back and right back, so Cancelo could actually be benched. That's why it's very difficult to kind of garner who is going to be in the starting 11 for you and who won't. But ultimately, for any, teams that you have, for the early lineups, that will give you a good indication. That's why sometimes it's very important to wait until the deadline so you have those lineups and then you can make your final transfers. But other than that, we can only just guess, make educated guesses and then push on from there. But ultimately, we just don't know anything for sure. I will only kind of highlight any players that I think that could be rotation risks. And if not, those who I think will play. But ultimately, we can all be wrong about it. So looking at the goalkeepers, it's kind of the same goalkeepers that I always talk about with Limitless, because I want to just target the best defences and also the fixtures. Now, I would go for Mendy once again, especially on a Limitless, but if you're not sure about him starting, because it could be Kepa, Chelsea have already qualified, but once again, not for first position yet, so still something to play for. But there is still the odd chance that Kepa gets that final game. It happened last season during the group stages, but that was with Frank Lampard. So just take that with a pinch of salt. But I would go with Edouard Mendy. And if you don't want to go for him and you're not too sure, I'd probably target another very good fixture, this time for Manchester United, and go for David De Gea against Young Boys. But otherwise, Mendy would be the goalkeeper, and he's the one playing on Wednesday, so the 8th of December. Bear that in mind. You want to have two goalkeepers, one playing on the 7th on the Tuesday and another playing on the Wednesday, the 8th of December. Now, who are we going to pick for the other one? Probably the same as we always do. We're going to go with Thibaut Courtois, and he can also get some save points. And I think Inter isn't really an easy fixture, but I would probably go with Courtois. And I look at all the other fixtures really on that day, on the Tuesday, and I'm not really that impressed. But I would try to cover Real Madrid with Thibaut Courtois potentially. You can go for someone else too. And for any of these, players, you can also offer your suggestions down in the comment section below. But with Real Madrid still fighting for something and in decent form in La Liga and in all competitions, I would go with Thibaut Courtois. And I think it's kind of a good goalkeeper pairing on a Limitless pretty much throughout the whole group stages. We're actually going to double up on Real Madrid defence here. We're going to go with Eder Militao. Alaba's another one you can go for, and he has more attacking threat, but with Eder Militao, those ball recoveries are just very important, and he's very consistent at them, and he can get you 5+ points pretty much every single match day because of those. So even without a clean sheet, there's a good chance Eder Militao will still offer you more than just a simple blank of 2 points. So Eder Militao is a very good choice heading into the knockouts even. He's someone to keep an eye on, and his price is fairly decent, but of course that doesn't matter on a Limitless, and I would go for him. This is where it gets a bit complicated, because how do you actually determine which players are actually going to start, especially from teams like Chelsea? But that fixture is so good against Zenit that I would risk it and go for a Chelsea defender, especially once again on a Limitless. And I would probably be looking at either Rudiger or Christensen. You can also go for Reece James. There's also Azpilicueta. There's a lot of different options, but I would just go for the most nailed of the bunch, the one who's most likely to start, unless obviously something happens there with Tuchel and he just plans to rotate most of the key players and those who haven't got a rest yet. But I would go with Antonio Rudiger, very similar to Eder Militao. He can get those ball recoveries, but with him you're mainly looking at the clean sheets and then maybe a few additional points on top of that because of ball recoveries. He also offers attacking threat, so he can get assists and goals from set pieces or just knockoffs with headers. So I think Rudiger is a good choice, and facing Zenit, I think this is a great fixture for Chelsea. They've been very shaky recently, the Blues, against Watford, against West Ham, but I think they'll turn things round, and their defence is the main reason why they're in such a strong position in every competition they're in, and I think they'll go back to basics and start to shore things up at the back. So I would go with Antonio Rudiger. I would actually suggest targeting another fixture in the same group, and that is Juventus against Malmo. You can go for any of the defenders really, Bonucci, De Ligt, even Alexandro, but I probably would go for De Ligt. Once again, ball recovery is very important. Alexandro, probably the most explosive in terms of attacking potential, but it's not really something that happens too often with Alexandro. With De Ligt, though, he can occasionally get you these 7 to 9 points through ball recoveries and clean sheets, and I think both of them are possible against Malmo. But one thing that you have to definitely take into account is that Juventus are just nowhere near the same team as they have been in the past decade, and they are starting to rebuild. So definitely things aren't rosy there in Turin, but I think De Ligt is a good choice, and looking at a Limitless right now, Matchday 6, I would be going for De Ligt. This may be a bit of an odd one, but I'm actually going to go with a Manchester United defender. That fixture against Young Boys, I would probably recommend having at least De Gea or one of their defenders for that, and I'm not a big fan of them defensively, and it's only one game that they played against Palace, but signs were encouraging, and there are a few players who have actually been doing well in UCL Fantasy already. Now, the player I'm actually going to go with is Alex Telles. I think he could be a decent choice. If we actually look at how he's done so far, he hasn't really played the majority of the games, but when he has, 9 points and 7. So I think Telles could actually be a good acquisition for you. He seems to be first choice at the moment over Luke Shaw. And even though he conceded to Villarreal, he did actually score the goal, and that's why he did get 9 points in Matchday 2. And in Matchday 5, he kept the clean sheet against Villarreal. And I think he should get a start here against Young Boys, just to secure top spot in the group. And I think Alex Telles could actually be a good purchase. Then I look at other players like João Cancelo, for example, Trent, and there's also Joshua Kimmich. I would love all of them on a Limitless, and I kind of always recommend those options, but all of them are probably a bit more likely to be rotated than these four that I've got on screen. But if you are confident of one of those three I just mentioned starting, one of those infamous attacking defenders, then I would probably suggest going for one of them, but it is risky. I would definitely be cautious about going for one of those because ultimately on a Limitless you want to maximize the amount of points you can get, and going for these attacking fullbacks or holding midfielders would be very beneficial to you, but at the same time it's very risky and it could actually mitigate and undermine your Limitless in the end. So I would definitely recommend caution there, but Alex Telles I think could be a very nice differential too, and this defense is looking pretty decent overall. It's probably not the best defense when you compare it to Matchday 2 or Matchday 5 Limitless teams, or even Matchday 3, but it's still pretty good regardless. So for the final spot, you can go for one of those three options, and I would be tempted by any of them and even take the risk potentially, but you can also look at others like Marquinhos facing Club Brugge at home. The reason why I'm probably not going to go there is because PSG have been poor all season, especially defensively. They don't keep too many clean sheets. Club Brugge can still cause problems, and they have been fairly decent in that group, so I probably won't go there, despite the fact that he is worth mentioning. Marquinhos, he can get ball recoveries, he's very good in the air, he can get some goals and maybe assists, and I just think he's a quality defender. But the one I'm actually going to go with, and it's not Mazzari either, although he's another one worth highlighting, I'm actually going to go for Nicolas Otamendi, and he's someone I'm looking to get into my normal team. I know he's only 5 million, and you're always tempted to go for the kind of premium assets, the ones who are most expensive, but he still has a fairly high ceiling because he can get Man of the Match awards. He's already got 2 this season against Barcelona and Dynamo Kiev, who he is facing next. 11 and 14 points. He's a ball recovery machine, and he's been in great form since the summer with the Copa America. I think Nicolas Otamendi is worth it, and I know a lot of these defenders you see here are kind of focused on ball recoveries, and that's why if you want a bit more of a balance, you can go for an attacking fullback. But Nicolas Otamendi, I think, is worth the money, and it doesn't really matter anyway in terms of if he's cheap or if he's expensive. It doesn't really matter. I would just go for those that I'm most confident in producing big returns, and I think Nicolas Otamendi can do that for you. So to complete the defense, we have got Nicolas Otamendi in there, and it's kind of a different defense as we have seen before. But if you're not really too sure about going for double Real Madrid defense, I completely understand that. Inter Milan could score a goal. You could change Courtois to David De Gea. You could change Eder Militao to an attacking fullback that I mentioned before. But if you go for all three of those, João Cancelo, Trent and Kimmich, I think it's just way too risky, and Kimmich hasn't been in the squad recently for Bayern Munich, and that's why he's kind of excluded from these discussions. The next two names are pretty much the ones that I always talk about in every single video, but I think they're that good and they're worth inclusion. But what I would say is that they could be rotated. So I look at Leroy Sané. I think he will start, but there is a possibility that he will be benched, especially with Gnabry back into the mix as well, and Coman, of course. So I would be very cautious about this one with Leroy Sané. And then there's Mohamed Salah, but I would still go for him because there's just not really any other options there for Liverpool on that right-hand side. But there's still the odd chance that he does get dropped or rested for the Premier League. So these two are risky picks, but I still think it's worth it, and they just offer such great value. Going for kind of midfielders that are a bit more likely to start, or that, you'd be very surprised if they were benched. I'm actually going to go with Bruno Fernandez. He is facing Young Boys, and I would definitely attack this fixture. Under Rangnick, things are looking good at the moment. Very early to say, and United have a great stretch of fixtures in the Premier League. I think they'll go on a little run, and I think they'll finish their group strongly. So you want to have at least one of Bruno Fernandez or Cristiano Ronaldo on a Limitless, and I would go for Bruno Fernandez, and we'll see later who is in our attack, but I think he's actually definitely someone worth targeting. And despite the fixture looking fairly tough, another one I would go with, and someone who's kind of fallen out of favour in the Premier League, is Riyad Mahrez. He's been doing so well in the Champions League last season and this season, and I think he can do well against Leipzig. Maybe this is not going to be everyone's cup of tea, and you don't have to go for Mahrez, but I would probably go for him at this moment in time. City have so many midfielders, that's kind of the problem, and not only could Mahrez actually not start, but if he does, the goals could be shared and Mahrez might not even get a nice piece of the pie that you want. So it's a very risky pick, that one. You don't have to, but I would be very tempted to get Mahrez on a Limitless. And the final midfielder, actually, there's a lot to choose from. There's Nkunku still against City. I think he could do pretty decent. And there is Pedro Goncalves. He's been doing very well, and as you can see, 42 points, and he's only played 3 games. That is absolutely insane. He is facing Ajax, though, the best team in that group. There's Jude Bellingham. You can look down the list. Gnabry would actually be an interesting one. You could even triple up on Bayern Munich and their attack. That's not really a bad idea, even though it's against Barcelona in name. There's Chiesa against Malmo. I'd be very tempted by that too. Looking at across the list, there's so many you could pick, but ultimately it's a tough one. I'm not that convinced by a lot of them. Sadio Mane is pretty decent too. Ziyech if he does start, but there's a lot of rotation in the front three for Chelsea. It could be Lukaku now building his fitness back up, playing in this game, and he could be a great choice as well. But ultimately, I look down the list and it's not looking as strong as it normally is. So, you know who I'd actually go for? I would go for Pedro Goncalves, if not Federico Chiesa. It's up to you who you go for that final midfielder spot. And I'm just not as infused by most of these as I was in previous weeks, but it's still a solid looking midfield. I would just be careful about rotation, especially with Leroy Sané and Mohamed Salah. And finally, looking at the forwards, another bit of a rotation risk potentially is Robert Lewandowski, but his form is absolutely sensational, and if you don't go with him and he starts, then you're just going to be probably in a really bad position, and his ownership is only going to increase heading into the knockout stages. He's an absolute beast at the moment, and he just scores in every single game. When he gets 6 points, people are disappointed. That's how good he is at the moment, but I would go for him. But just like with Sané, with Salah, those fullbacks, I would still be a bit concerned if he's actually going to start or not. And to look at the other two strikers, it's going to be a bit different to my previous Limitless teams, because I tend to go for Karim Benzema, Sebastian Haller, and all these choices. But we've now got more forwards into the mix again. Lukaku has returned from injury. Haaland has returned from injury. Cristiano Ronaldo is looking imperious in the Champions League. And you look down the list, Vinicius Jr. is another great choice. But I'm definitely going to go with Cristiano Ronaldo and targeting that young boys fixture. Might seem a bit risky, but I think United will probably score 2 or 3 goals, and Bruno Fernandez and Ronaldo have been very good in the Champions League. Ronaldo is not the top scorer, but he's up there just behind Haller and Lewandowski, and Bruno Fernandez is the top assister with 6 assists, so very impressive Champions League campaigns from both of them. 6 goals for Ronaldo as well. For the Portuguese duo, it's looking very strong, and I would probably try to target that, and it's a nice differential to have, going for both Bruno Fernandez and Cristiano Ronaldo. So who's going to complete this team? Karim Benzema, I talked about this in my team selection video. It looks like he's going to be missing this game completely through injury. He got substituted off early in Real Madrid's last game, which they ended up winning with Luka Jovic coming on. And you could maybe go for him. I would probably recommend Vinicius Jr. if you do want to get a Real Madrid attacker. But ultimately, I'm going to go with a familiar face, someone who is just so important to their team and has come back from injury and he's just looking so good once again. It's Erling Haaland, and he's always kind of a mainstay in these best Limitless teams when he is fit. He's back, and I think he is worth going for. And it's kind of a differential. Most people obviously sold him because he got injured. 25% ownership still, very high, so a lot of kind of maybe dead teams or those inactive managers kind of kept him, but against Besiktas I think he could do very well. He hasn't had a great Champions League campaign so far, but that injury obviously hasn't helped him at all, and even in Matchday 1 he got 7 points, but nothing spectacular. But in the last few years in the Champions League, he has been one of the best players, if not the best. The Champions League top scorer last season. I would probably go for Erling Haaland. You don't have to. You could go for maybe Romelu Lukaku if you want to risk it. You could go for Vinicius Jr. And there's a few others that I mentioned before. I would just go for Erling Haaland though. I think he is probably the best one. If you're not really feeling him, you could just go for the top scorer, the joint top scorer in the Champions League, Sebastian Haller, and he can complete the front line instead of Erling Haaland. So that's kind of a 50-50 call. It's up to you who you go for. For my team selection, Erling Haaland or Sebastian Haller could come into my team, and let's wait and see what happens there. But I will try to leave things as late as possible so we have as much information heading into the deadline. But that's the best Limitless team. Let me know what you would change. I was very tempted to include João Cancelo and a few others like Trent, but it's very difficult with this rotation kind of looming over them, and even some of these picks like Lewandowski, Sane and Salah, don't be surprised if any of them are benched. But thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, smash the like button and subscribe if you're new around here. Once again, thank you to everyone for tuning in, for commenting, for subscribing, for becoming channel members, sending super chats. All of that is much appreciated. You can join the Discord server in the description below. There's a link. Same with the league for the UCL Fantasy and also FPL. You can check out my FPL videos as well. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, Dylan_RCM. It's the same as my YouTube username. Thank you very much. Good luck with Matchday 6. Hopefully, rotation doesn't hit you too hard. And I'll see you next time.